In the fields and green forests of Japan, farmers produce valuable agricultural products. Their creativity and perseverance not only bring bumper harvests, but also contribute to enhancing the value of Japanese agricultural products in the international market. Let's explore how Japanese farmers harvest thousands of tons of agricultural products. Udo is a wild, edible plant native to various regions of Japan. It has been used as a spring dish since ancient times. Udo is divided into Yama Udo and Nanka Udo. Both grow from early spring to about April. However, the appearance is contradictory. Yama Udo is green and looks wild, while Nanka Udo is white. These differences in appearance correlate with the environment in which they grow. Yama Udo consists of thick, fleshy, upright stems that average 60 to 90 centimeters long and 2 to 5 centimeters in diameter. Despite its ability to grow to large sizes, Yama Udo is still harvested seasonally because of its young and tender stems. Meanwhile, Nanka Udo is grown through the softening agriculture method, which shields them from sunlight. After 30 to 40 days, Udo is harvested when it reaches a height of about 70 centimeters. Peak harvest season is usually from December to April. Because the area planted with Udo trees is only about 1 meter high, harvesting underground is very difficult. Because their work requires constant squatting, many farmers suffer from leg and back problems. Farmers carefully cut the Udo and wrapped it to take it out of the tunnel. Another person was waiting on the ground to lift the wooden box. Timing is important after harvest because Udo will quickly turn green when exposed to sunlight. Therefore, farmers gradually switched to growing and harvesting indoors, so that Udo was less affected by the weather. The Udo growing industry in Takikawa quickly became very popular and achieved high yields of about 450 tons per year. Udo's flavor changes the image of wild vegetables. People are often concerned about the acrid taste of wild vegetables, but for Udo, it can even be eaten raw. When you bite into a piece of freshly harvested Udo, it has a crunchy sound and a faint sweetness spreads in your mouth. The fresh and refreshing taste lingers afterward. That's why this plant became Takikawa's specialty. Now let's visit Kasumigura Lake, the second largest lake in Japan, proud to have the highest lotus root production in Japan. The land along the lake is fertile and has abundant water to help lotus roots thrive. Lotus roots around Kasumigura Lake are harvested from July to March. Every year at harvest time, all lotus stems and leaves above the lake water are cut off to prevent the lotus from growing further. Lotus roots grow underground, dormant in mud, and gradually accumulate starch from summer to winter. This means that lotus roots harvested in the same lake area may have different flavors, depending on the time of harvest. Young summer lotus roots will taste as sweet as pears. Farmers continue harvesting until May, when the lotus root becomes more flexible as the sugar content turns into starch. The mud made traveling difficult, and finding lotus roots was certainly not an easy task. Farmers said it takes patience and good technique to dig out the entire lotus root. Because lotus roots may not grow straight in the soil, farmers must be gentle and not break them to be able to sell them at a good price. On average, each kilogram of lotus root costs about 2.8 USD. The lotus field is about 50 to 60 centimeters deep. The farmers had to kneel in the water, up to their chests, while they dug into the mud to find lotus roots. They use water jets to search for lotus roots by hand and go through the washing process many times. This is also a way to prevent the skin of the lotus root from being damaged. Lotus roots transported under these careful processes are not only delicious, their whiteness and appearance also add to their value. After being transported to the processing facility, the lotus roots are cut off and canned one by one. At Renkun Sankyo Day, lotus roots are harvested and shipped within 2 days of receiving farmers' orders. Besides lotus root, Japan is also the country with the most delicious mushrooms. Have you ever seen millions of shiitake mushrooms growing in the forest? Farmers carefully select oak trees that are about 10 to 20 centimeters in diameter, creating optimal growing conditions for the shiitake mushrooms to begin their growth process. Oak wood is neatly stacked, then brought to the shiitake mushroom growing area. Next, farmers will drill small holes in the wood to implant shiitake mushroom embryos. These holes are drilled about 10 to 15 centimeters apart depending on the size of the shiitake mushrooms. The mushroom embryo is implanted into the hole using a special tool to ensure the shiitake embryo is implanted at the correct position and depth. Each log will yield 2 to 4 times more shiitake mushrooms depending on hole size and weather conditions. After the shiitake mushroom embryos are transplanted into the logs, they are placed in suitable positions to wait for the shiitake mushrooms to grow to ensure a harvest. Japanese people often go into the forest and harvest each tree by hand. Harvesting is done by hand, with farmers carefully pulling the shiitake mushrooms out of the logs. They use plastic baskets to store finished products. When full, they will go to the place where the mushrooms are stored and preserved to prevent damage. The slow growth process and natural habitat of shiitake mushrooms give them a dense texture, rich flavor, and nutritional value. Growing wild shiitake mushrooms provides economic opportunities for local communities in Japan. In the southern provinces of Japan, shiitake mushrooms are grown the most in the country, accounting for 50 to 55% of total output at a relatively high price. Each year, only a limited amount of natural shiitake mushrooms can be harvested. That's why fresh shiitake mushrooms have a high price, while exported dried shiitake mushrooms are even more expensive. Upon arrival at the drying factory, the shiitake mushrooms are inspected again to remove unsuitable plants. Next, remove the soil residue and arrange them evenly together. The drying process takes place under strict control, including appropriate temperature and time to remove water from the shiitake mushrooms. At the same time, it still retains flavor and nutrients. In addition to delicious shiitake mushrooms, Japan is also famous for Lingzhi mushrooms. This mushroom has been used for thousands of years in traditional medicine to treat health. After felling the tree, the log rested for 2 weeks before being drilled. One log can withstand the growth of 15 Ganoderma mushrooms. The logs were inoculated with Ganoderma mushrooms and buried underground. Farmers take a long time to complete the entire process of growing and creating Ganoderma mushrooms. It takes 9 months before you can see Ganoderma mushrooms. But after a few months, when the Lingzhi mushroom has fully developed, it can be harvested and processed in many different ways. Wondering what makes it different from the millions of other mushrooms growing in the forest? The magic of Ganoderma mushrooms comes from the compounds locked inside its cell walls. Compared to shiitake mushrooms, Ganoderma mushrooms have a slower growth rate. farmers have to wait 75 to 90 days to harvest. Interestingly, the yield is proportional to each 1-inch diameter of the tree. For example, a 6-inch diameter log will grow reishi mushrooms in about 6 years. This means that larger diameter logs will take longer to wait until the first harvest. As the Lingzhi mushroom matures, it begins to turn reddish brown and the spores fall off the cap. Mature Ganoderma mushrooms are 1 to 4 inches thick. When farmers pluck Ganoderma mushrooms, they tend to choose Ganoderma mushrooms with white bellies. Because when harvested late, if they turn brownish, they have started to decompose. Harvesting is done by holding the root with one hand and pulling up with the other. After washing with water, the Ganoderma mushrooms will be dried at temperatures below 50 degrees Celsius. Finally, we visit cabbage fields in Japan. Cabbage is a healthy food and rich in nutrients. After 70 to 115 days from planting, depending on the variety, they are ready to harvest. The base of the cabbage will be 4 to 6 inches across. The head of cabbage should be firm, compact, with tightly wrapped outer leaves. If it is not possible to harvest immediately, smaller heads of cabbage can continue to grow for the next harvest. Farmers use a knife to cut the head of cabbage from the stem, leaving a few leaves on the outside to protect the cabbage during storage. Farmers often harvest in cool weather, which can help maintain freshness and flavour. On large commercial cabbage farms, harvesting is done through automated machines attached to tractors. These machines lift the entire tree out of the soil. Cabbage moves along a conveyor belt. Farmers continue to remove damaged outer leaves. After that, the cabbage is loaded into containers and waits for transport to the warehouse for storage. Farmers are operating machinery, moving it through cabbage fields to systematically harvest. Depending on the size and capacity of the machine, it can harvest multiple rows of cabbage simultaneously, which greatly reduces the amount of labor required to harvest by hand. As dawn breaks across Asian fields, from banana orchards in Thailand to apple fields in Japan, the fruit harvest appears like a vivid painting. Now, let's visit fruit orchards to see how Asian farmers harvest millions of tons of fruit. After planting, the apple orchard begins to bear fruit from the 7th or 8th year. However, it all depends on the selected variety. Fruit yield will increase gradually each year and then remain stable for 30 to 35 years. A farm in Japan has an area of 114,200 acres of apple trees. Total apple production reached 94,600 tons, bringing in revenue of about 1,316 million USD. The apple industry has become a pillar industry that helps increase people's income and promote the rapid development of the local economy. First of all, farmers will determine the optimal ripeness for picking. Correct ripeness is not only important for quality, but also for successful preservation. Picking fruit early is often both inefficient and expensive. When apples are immature, they bruise easily and shrink during storage. Apple orchards in Asia are often harvested by hand. Farmers will climb ladders or use support tools to carefully pick each apple. This is an extremely labor-intensive method that predominates in the production of dessert apples. It appears mainly in large fruit orchards, accompanied by the participation of a significant number of seasonal workers. On average, an apple orchard needs about 10 to 12 harvesting workers to ensure the job is completed. Farmers handle apples as gently as they would an egg. They carefully placed all the apples in the picking box. Do not drop the fruit or jostle it during transportation. This is the only way to prevent the fruit from being damaged before being distributed to the market. The harvest usually lasts until late October, and fresh apples are usually available in early November. Once harvest and sales are complete, the production cycle begins again. At the processing site, apples are graded based on size, color, and quality. Apples are washed to remove dirt and pesticides, then stored in cold storage or humidity-controlled environment to retain freshness longer. Inside the spiky shell is a passionate sweetness. Have you ever tasted the taste of durian? Now let's explore how farmers harvest this unique fruit. Durian season in Malaysia usually lasts from May to September, peaking in July and August. When durians ripen, their spines turn from yellow-brown to dark brown, with a characteristic strong smell. However, durian harvested at this stage is not suitable for transportation or long-term storage. When durians mature, a spot on their stem will swell, allowing them to naturally fall off the tree. That is also the reason why durians can fall at any time. To ensure that farmers can collect fallen durians immediately, farmers often tie strings to the durians. This is to help prevent the fruit from touching the ground and damaging the durian's thorns. Professional durian farms often tie strings to each durian fruit when it has just matured. When the durian fruit ripens and falls from the tree branch, the string immediately wraps tightly around the durian fruit, preventing the durian fruit from falling to the ground and being damaged. At this time, farmers can carefully lower the fruit and harvest. At the beginning and end of the harvest season, durian is usually harvested only once a day because the garden's productivity is relatively low during this period. After being picked, they have to go through a series of processes before reaching you. Durians are quickly transported to the collection center for further classification. Despite its thick skin and rough appearance, durian is not suitable for rough transportation. Because once durian fruits rub against each other, the durian spines will break and become susceptible to pathogens. Besides conventional preservation, fresh durians can be quickly frozen by exposing them to liquid nitrogen. Frozen durian can be stored at -18 degrees Celsius for 2 years while still retaining its original flavor, color, and texture. Dragon fruit is famous for its vibrant color, exotic appearance, and potential health benefits. With its growing popularity in domestic and international markets, dragon fruit cultivation offers economic opportunities for farmers and meets growing consumer demand. Depending on the variety and environmental conditions, dragon fruit trees can begin to bear fruit 12 to 15 months after planting. Each year, dragon fruit begins to flower in May to June. The growth period of dragon fruit is quite short. Only 1 month after flowering, farmers can enter the harvest season. Similar to other fruits, dragon fruit farmers also pay great attention to harvest time, because ripeness will affect the quality and risk of spoilage of the fruit. Farmers choose fruit that is not fully ripe or has turned pink. At the same time, when pressed, the fruit deflates slightly, the skin has a bright color, and the scales on the outside of the skin have begun to wither. Picking is also quite simple. Farmers just need to gently separate the fruit from the stem. Besides, dragon fruit can be harvested with scissors or a knife. The harvested fruit is immediately transferred to a place that can avoid sunlight before packaging or storage. Early morning or cool afternoon is the appropriate time to harvest to avoid hot direct sunlight, which increases the temperature in the fruit. If stored in optimal conditions, usually at 10 degrees Celsius, dragon fruit will retain its flavor for up to 17 days. Goodbye dragon fruit garden. Now let's go to banana garden in Thailand. When the bananas mature, farmers place pads between the banana bunches to protect them from bumps and bruises. Then the bananas are wrapped in cloth or plastic bags to repel insects. Bananas are ready to be harvested about 10 to 13 weeks after the plant flowers. Bananas are always harvested by hand with two-person teams who work well together. First, a person will use a knife to cut the banana bunch from the stem. At this point, the chamber is lowered onto the other person's shoulder pad. Most farms in the Delta can use a cable car system to move bunches of bananas to processing sites. If the bananas are pulled too quickly along the cable, it can damage the fruit. A small, sharp knife is used to cut the bunch of bananas out of the bunch. Then, these bananas are placed in a water tank to remove the pus. Finally, bananas are graded according to size and quality. Bananas are packaged whole and partially in cardboard boxes with plastic lining. Each box is guaranteed to have a net weight of 13 kilograms when released to the market. Now we go to the pineapple fields in the Philippines to see how farmers harvest millions of pineapples. This is the leading country with a production level of about 2.7 million tons of pineapples per year. The country's pineapple growing area is estimated to be over 40,000 hectares. Under good sunny conditions, it takes 18 to 32 months for a pineapple to mature. Prolonged cold and freezing temperatures will slow the ripening process and make the fruit more acidic. Even pineapple will be seriously damaged at a temperature of 28 degrees. Pineapples are not ready to ripen until most of the fruit has turned orange-yellow. However, size and color changes are not reliable indicators of ripeness. Because pineapple is a fruit that does not continue to ripen after harvest, choosing the right time to harvest will affect the entire quality of pineapple products. Every year, about 3,200 workers flock to pineapple farms in Indonesia to harvest. Millions of pineapples will be picked by hand. Before harvesting, workers need to carefully prepare protective gear and gloves, because the sawtooth-like leaves can hurt them. After harvesting, pineapples will be sent to factories for packaging or processing into other products such as canned pineapples and dried pineapples.